Number 7?
Podcast 7.
On what's the day? What's the Friday today?
Friday the 13th. Lucky for all of us.
Everyone.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
And you. And we're on the other side of something, aren't we?
Well, we both are. You're back from your holiday learning a new skill. How is that?
Yeah, really, really nice. 5 days in Fuerteventura, wing foiling, learning a new skill, which involves pain and discomfort and many times thinking, what's the point? I'm not going to bother going to this day's lessons. But at the end, walking away from there with a big smile and going, that was well worth it. Because it opens up doorways to something new, something fun that will allow me to go and play on the waves and the water when it's windy. I don't have that opportunity at the moment. So, yeah, really good. Slightly different experience from what you've been through.
Yeah, different type of arduous.
Yeah.
I'd have thought. So I'm the other side of fissure repair, hemorrhoid removal, and probably a couple of other things that have got very long surgical names or clinical names that I don't remember, but it was a quite complex operation. And we are today, I think, on day 16 or 17 of the recovery. So some journey since we last spoke. And the last podcast, in fact, podcast 6, was preparing for challenging situations and how we might face those and why sometimes we procrastinate and put these things off. Now I'm on the other side to some extent. It's a journey. Yeah, it's definitely been a thing.
Would you like to expand a little bit on that? We've spoken obviously this morning before we've done this podcast about kind of some of the challenges that you've faced in that period of time. You had an elective operation. Mm-hmm. You chose to put yourself in this situation, and there was an investment of in doing this that you are going to give yourself in time, over time, comfort. But in that period from the operation to the date where that comfort comes, there's uncertainty and there's up and down and pain and discomfort and movements that elicit discomfort.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 or 3 days were fine because I was heavily dosed up, obviously general anaesthetic for the actual procedure, and then gratuitous amounts of morphine. I'm sure I had a double dose just because I could. When you get asked post-operation, how's the pain? It's always best to say, oh, it's hard, it's not very nice. So probably was riding the wave of a bit of the morphine, and eventually that is going to, and general anaesthetic, these things are going to wear off. Your system is in a tug of war between strong painkillers that create constipation and quite strong laxatives that mean that you're not putting an awful lot of pressure through the system. And so semi-consciously there's also sort of an aversion to eating, and you're kind of sat around watching, in my case, a lot of surf videos and skateboard videos, because obviously I'm living my second childhood. And so for the first 2 or 3 days, I was accepting of the fact I was a patient and I'd just been through quite evasive surgery. So not major surgery in the way that colon resectioning that I'd had 2 years previously is quite a major operation. Technically speaking, this is not that complicated, but it is obviously in an area of high sensitivity with an awful lot of nerves in and around that area, and you're still using the muscle even though it's torn and in repair. So technically quite painful. For the first 2 or 3 days, you manage through it because you are a patient. But quite quickly you move into the next phase, which is your mind is alert, you're capable of cognizant work or intellectual work, but physically there's a lag. And some of the systems that I use to manage my performance at work, for example, were not able to be deployed. So quite literally, things like going for a run, going for a swim, having a sauna, any of those types of things weren't available to me. And so the dopamine effect of those things wasn't there. And so then I was doing things which I find difficult normally, but without necessarily the stimulation and the management system around that. So that's been quite interesting. And also, when you go online digitally, seemingly you are fine. From sort of the top of my head to my chest in my little Zoom or Google window, I look well enough. In fact, I probably looked quite rested, and I'm making an appearance, so therefore I must be fully present. And yet at the same time, you're obviously managing quite a complex recovery. To speak of it, because I think sometimes it's useful to explain, going to the loo, without getting too graphic, so it's fine to listen while you're eating, but that was a 1 hour process. So it took me sort of 30 minutes to run up to it. So once the body starts to signal that it needs to sort of defecate, I was taking multiple painkillers because I could combine things. And so I could have a cocktail of the prescribed painkillers plus paracetamol and ibuprofen. I'd sort of like stockpile all of it. Then I'd actually go to the loo, which might take 5 minutes and be very much a mental activity. Normally that stuff is sort of subconscious, and mostly we're scrolling on our phones and going through, and it happens, and then you're kind of done. It's not like that. This is definitely an active, you're fully involved in the whole process. And then because you are wounded, you can't wipe. So what you have to do is then shower and clean. I guess in some cultures, douching like this, is that the phrase? I guess it is. Yeah, that's kind of normal. But for me, it meant, I needed to be in close proximity to a shower. And so that whole process, and then pain recovery, taking a breath, and then being prepared to sort of sit and then start to work again. If you're having quite strong laxatives all the time, this movement might happen 3 or 4 times. So you've sort of got 4 or 5 hours of lag simply doing something that is, a number 2. And there's no compensation for that in this mental load that we place upon ourselves. We've talked before about this kind of, well, we haven't podcasted about it, but you and I have talked about this productivity load, where we wake up in the mornings and for lots of reasons, cultural reasons, we might feel that there's an output that is required in order for us to have a productive value within a system. But there's no compensation for this kind of, you're not injured, but you're not at 100%. Yeah. So being in that liminality was quite a thing to manage. And of course, people are caring and ask the question, well, how are you? I think they like the answer, I'm okay, I'm making a recovery. People want to hear that. They want to sort of know that things are okay for you. That's why they ask. It's a caring question. But it's not always true that that's the reality of the situation. It's actually quite complicated. We're moving forwards. There's also an unknown part of this, which is you don't know what the outcome is going to feel like. You know what the symptom was before you went in. So you kind of know what your baseline is. It's like, okay, is it going to be better or worse than that? We don't know the answer to that question yet. So it's still uncomfortable. There's discomfort. I mean, it's got stitches in it. It's had Botox injections. There's a variety of things that have been done, and it's only day 16. So this is not necessarily concluded. And I think that unknowing is quite difficult to manage as well, because it's like, okay, well, if this is it, would I have elected to do it? If it's 50% better than this, would I have been more likely to have elected to do it? And if actually we get to a point where there's literally no feeling and discomfort or sensation and no pain, then why would you not do it? And so I get asked that question. Sorry, this is like a monologue, but I get asked that question, was it worth it? And I'm not sure that I can answer that clearly yet, because we're not at the destination, or it's not like you're given by anyone where the finishing gate is. This could take 3 months. Saying that, there has been lightness that is incomparable to the symptoms I was experiencing before the operation. There have been moments where it's like, okay, I don't feel any discomfort, and there is no underlying chronic pain. If this is what the outcome is, then it was worth both the time and effort and money that I've invested to make this choice. I think that at any time when you have these types of interventions, it also is an opportunity to question, well, when things are taken away, what is it that you miss most? And what is it that you're most looking forward to in recovery? And while I don't think I underestimate how much I enjoy being outside and moving, it's reaffirming to go, okay, the things that I love, time with my friends, larking about, being in the sea, being active. It's good to remember how important that is and how fortunate I am, and know that I'm probably likely to be able to recover and get back to those types of things. So, yeah, sure, I've missed that stuff. I realise now how important it is. So, yeah, I think whenever we have these medical interventions, they are potentially a timely reminder of the things that, you know, are important to us. I'm not saying most dear. That typically will be time with family and friends, and time, you know, maybe with ourselves. Similarly, I've definitely had a lot of time on my own. I would hope that my world can open back up so that it's not centred in the sort of like the 3 inches in and around, you know, between the small of my back and my cock and balls. You know, that my world has literally been epicentered around my arsehole, and it will be great when that is not the centre of attention, either from other people or for myself. So I'm looking forward to what comes. It's still on the journey, Karl. Very long answer to a short question.
It's a good answer, and I giving a platform. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast about this today as well. Is when someone is in pain, there's a number of things happen. So I work with chronic pain patients and acute pain patients, but we lose our sense of identity for a lot of the reasons that you've mentioned there. We can't engage in life in a way that we would have done historically, in the rich and meaningful vein that we would have done. And that question around prognosis, what is to come?
Exactly.
That's really, really difficult, because no one can absolutely put a finger on, by this date, you will be able to do X and Y, and by that date, you'll be able to do A and B. There is that uncertainty. And sitting in that space, you get glimmers. I know we've spoken about some glimmers of things that have been, moments of maybe skateboarding a little bit, or being able to, you went up to London yesterday, which was a mix of good and bad and discomfort and success as well. But sitting in that space of uncertainty can be a real challenge. Now, when I met you this morning, before we did this, you said to me, if things carry on as they are right now, you will be disappointed with the outcome. And I get that, because I can see that you're carrying something more.
I agree. It is unlikely that this is the destination. I think it is infused with comments from surgeons, or there weren't multiple surgeons, the surgeon that's sort of, for example, 1 in 100 people might experience incontinence as a consequence of this operation. And so when you're going through a process of defecating, you don't know whether it's incontinence or not. Because it's not normal, that is for sure. So you're like, okay, well, is this going to be the process and passage every time? And is this what incontinence looks like? Because incontinence doesn't necessarily look like you're shitting yourself without knowing or acknowledging it. But you're going through a healing process, so it's probably incomplete as the story. I recognise that, but these moments of doubt come up. And the system above the wound still does what it does. And so if you feed it well, it might perform well. If you feed it less well, then it's going to get sort of, blocked up and maybe be suboptimal. So the operation doesn't affect the whole system. It's just the last mile. And so you have to bear in mind that, okay, well, I've probably eaten quite badly recently because I've just eaten available calories that are lying around. And I've eaten quite a lot of processed and white soft food, and I've probably been quite decadent on things like chocolate, saying to myself, well, I need a hit of something positive, so I'll eat quite a lot of stuff I might not eat in the same quantity or at all. And of course that has a material impact on the system, and it's like, okay, nothing is quite normal. So I think that there will be a change again as we move forward. One of the things that was, I think, a real revelatory moment, or a moment of revelation, was that in a conversation last weekend, a friend remarked that maybe in recovery I wouldn't be such a grumpy bugger. And
good friend.
He is a good friend. We haven't known each other for very long, and I don't think he had realised the impact that would have on me as a comment. I took that away, and I went through sort of the second arrow debate about beating myself up, and it was, I don't love that phrase, but it was triggering emotionally to go, okay, do I bias towards pessimism, and can that be expressed as being grumpy and annoyed, and is that annoying? I think his second phrase was, you'll have nothing to complain about. Now you have to juxtaposition, when you get asked, how are you? Obviously people often will say, I'm fine. I think we've both increasingly been honest about what is going on so that we can address some of the taboos, particularly in male culture, stoicism, masking, these types of psychological phenomena. As a consequence, what I've probably done is sort of gone, well, I'm in pain. And so that's been perceived, even subconsciously, as being a little bit grumpy or pessimistic or having things to complain about. Or at least that was my interpretation. So that was quite an interesting moment. I've spent the last 2 weeks mostly on my own because my wife's been on holiday with her mother. And so I had quite a lot of time to sit in the discomfort of that comment. What I'm hoping most is that in full recovery, however I do it, whether I do it alone or with some therapeutic support or with friends, I can question that piece, which is like, when this is not about my arsehole, am I an arsehole? Do you see what I mean? It's like, okay, the most interesting thing that came out of this process is not necessarily the pain relief, but this kind of question, which is, am I a grumpy fuck because of the pain? Or am I just a grumpy fuck? Or am I not either of those things, and I will be emancipated from a behaviour? That's as much as I'm interested in the clinical outcome, I'm as interested in what that opportunity is to say, okay, well, I can either use it as an inflection point, or it is an inflection point. But that is the sort of silver lining in this, which is to say, okay, well, I forced an intervention here, and I've created an opportunity for growth. I don't think you go into a hemorrhoid operation with that expectation. I think that's just been my lived experience of it, going, okay, I've got an opportunity to shed another skin here and to sort of step over the skin of a former self. We talk sometimes about shredding versions of ourselves, and there may need to be some grieving of a former self, but there's also an opportunity to step beyond it. This may represent that in time. We'll see where it concludes in a few weeks' time.
It's pain changes us all whenever we're suffering with something acute or chronic. And you mentioned also, you looked at your timeline of how long this has been going on for. You said you got your first cream for symptoms 16 years ago, 2010. Is that right? Did you say that? If I just made that up.
Certainly, it's been a long period of time.
Yeah.
There's a question about how much time there is between the last treatment and this intervention.
Yeah. It's
a technicality. That inquiry has forced a sort of a reflection on how long had I been carrying this pain. And I knew that I've been like this for some time. If I think about Love Trails, for example, a festival that is a celebration of movement, not least running, but music and other forms of movement and sort of, intellectual inspiration. It's a great platform, and I work there. If I think about every instance of me being there, I've been in pain. This condition is somewhat seasonal. As it becomes warmer in temperature and dehydration is exacerbated, and therefore constipation can be exacerbated, your symptoms can be heightened in warmer climates. And Love Trails is in the summer. And so I've always been in pain while at Love Trails. And on reflection, it's like, okay, well, I've known it's been at least then 4 or 5 years, but to be shown in the NHS app that it's from 2010, and I probably was experiencing pain well before that. I've carried this for 16 years. And I think sometimes when we do carry pain, we normalise it. Our body has to normalise it to an extent. It becomes the new normal. But what I didn't realise was how long I'd been carrying the burden. The promise of the opportunity to just put that down and to be able to walk away from it is priceless. And so when I've had to reflect on the economic consequences of this decision, which is still in discussion, it's like, okay, if somebody put it in front of me in black and white and offered me the freedom from pain for the price, if it were affordable, I would probably take that choice. But it's interesting to see how long I've carried it before, in the hope that some over-the-counter remedy or some, potions or positivity and changes in lifestyle, all of these things have to be maintained. Well, not all of the over-the-counter stuff, but some of these positive lifestyle changes must be maintained. But they're not always a panacea. And so to realise that I've been carrying that for that long was again another revelation. It's like, okay, this is a quarter of my life that I've lived with chronic pain. Now, I'm fortunate to have had the time. I'm privileged to be here and grateful for the life opportunities that I've had. But if I reflect back, and I've had time to do so, every holiday in the last 16 years, I've been managing pain. I think I've used alcohol to mask that pain. You have a few drinks, for whatever reason, the pain disappears from your arse. Momentarily. It probably, and not even probably, it exacerbates it because of simple things like dehydrating, and consequentially it will not have helped. I understand that. But temporarily it was an anaesthetic. And you look back and reflect and you realise that you create adaptations in order to try to manage this. I know you work with a lot of patients who have had to, they tailor and adapt and then carry this stuff. It's not just hemorrhoids and pelvic pain, but more generally. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to a new normal where it's just not part of my narrative. That's going to be fascinating. I've recently just open drawers. This house is, every drawer has got paracetamol and ibuprofen in it. Most of the little cosmetic drawers in bathrooms, not bathrooms, it sounds like I live in a massive estate, but in the 2 bathrooms that we have in the house, if you open drawers or cupboards, you'll find various hemorrhoid creams and potions and powders. It's prevalent. And I'm looking forward to that sort of being something that can be cast aside.
I bet.
And to create space. That'll be the exciting part. There is a deep hopefulness on the way forward. And hopefully I can answer the question whether I had a pain in my arse or I am a pain in the arse.
You're not a pain in the arse. You're absolutely not a pain in the arse. I want to, in the last episode, you were building up to this event. And we've spoken a little bit about some of the coping strategies, whether that be medication, alcohol, distraction.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can just highlight for us some of the coping strategies, because you've said it, you've been alone, you've been in the house, you haven't been able to work, or you've shown up to work. in a capacity that's virtual and online. But I wonder if it would be helpful for us just to take a little glimpse at some of the coping strategies that you have been kind of steered towards. You mentioned things like dopamine, you mentioned kind of some obsessive thoughts in there, what you thought was going to happen, and now how you've navigated the last 16 days or so. I think that would be a really interesting space just to explore.
Okay. There was a routine that is somewhat temporary. Because I can't get up in the mornings and move for 2 hours running or cycling or going to the gym or whatever, what you can do with that time is somewhat different. Similarly in the evenings, I'm not going to put the laptop away and then suddenly be able to bounce around doing whatever I'm doing. And at the weekends, similarly charging around, one's life becomes much more restricted to sort of what's happening in this room and what's happening in the house, as opposed to sort of maybe more broadly what's happening in the community or across the country if I was to be moving around and doing things. So limited spatially, for sure. And also the routines are rewritten. That meant that I was inclining a lot towards just sitting in front of the computer, where arguably I already spend quite a lot of time working, whether it's for the clearing or whether it's for my book or whether it's for Deep Green or whether it's in coaching. That is also always a significant part of my life. Suddenly it became quite imbalanced. It was everything. I was getting up at 7 o'clock. I'd be at my machine by 7:30. And I guess I was also tapping on the glass of dopamine because the reward systems that might be embedded within going for a long walk or going for a long run or jumping into the sea or having a sauna, that this kind of the loop wasn't available. And so most of those loops were digital loops. And we all know, I think, that they are very short-lived spikes of dopamine, and they are addictive and being perpetuated. There are people engineering our attention in this way. That said, I also afforded myself a degree of kindness. It's like, okay, well, yeah, spend time out on Netflix watching. I've watched a lot of skate videos, a lot of surf videos. These are two sports I can't really do. I can't really do them anyway. But I absolutely couldn't do them in the last sort of 3 weeks. I'm not allowed near large bodies of water. I can't be submerged. I can shower, so I'm quite fragrant. But you can't jump in the sea. You can't go surfing. I mean, you can't fall off a skateboard. That's going to do you no good. The immediate jerked reaction to imbalance is not something that... There's no surgeon in the world who's like, oh yeah, you should skateboard within 7 days. It's just like not what is required. But I sort of then gorged on content related to a sport I can't do. I think that's okay. I spent quite a bit of time chasing articles of clothing on Vinted. Again, I think it was just giving me something to do. It was giving my mind something to play with. So I seemingly have bought a lot of sort of £5 t-shirts related to sort of surfing and skating. And some of those things have already been refactored and placed back onto Vinted and resold. But it gave a sense of purpose to the cadence of a day. It's like, oh, an order's arrived, and it was inconsequential financially, but it did raise that question about addiction to digital interfaces and to tapping the glass. More recently, and probably more beneficially, I've spent quite a bit of time with Claude. And this morning I thought, I called it a he, which is concerning. But I've migrated, as many people have, from ChatGPT for political reasons to Claude. Claude is a different type of robot. We've developed quite a good platonic relationship, and it is fair to say that if you engineer your prompts well and have great content to put in that environment and are asking for good outputs, it can be extremely productive and good fun. I'm sure we could do a whole podcast about the future of AI and our relationships with it and its relationship to the workplace and whose jobs are most likely to need to evolve and what that might mean consequentially. And that's a podcast. But I've tried to switch my attention away from this kind of habitual chasing after a pair of shorts to going, okay, well, let's at least move it into a productive space and have sort of... I haven't asked Claude how it's feeling, nor had conversations about my recovery. We've made it focused on, okay, well, how can I build forward of this point? What can we be doing over and above and better than what we are doing currently? So that's been quite useful. One of the things that you and I talked about 3 weeks ago was our use of social media. And I made an active choice. I put time locks on everything. And it's been really interesting to see how quickly an hour of WhatsApp is used up or an hour of Instagram is used up. Now, obviously, when you're in recovery, you've got plenty of time for that stuff, particularly when there's no one around. And so I've had to give myself permission, as if I'm a parent over a child, to go through the sort of the time wall. It is shocking how fast that comes up. Now, you could say that's because the app is being perceived as running in the background and you're not actually on WhatsApp for an hour. Regardless of that, let's assume it's some kind of fuzzy logic. The time in an app comes around really quick. I think that I've spent less time on social media in the last 2 weeks than perhaps I'd had prior to the op. And okay, one might sort of say, yeah, but check your Vinted time. Maybe I've just changed platform. And at the time of recording this podcast, we've obviously been through quite a bit in geopolitics and in markets and in the economy. I haven't had the capacity particularly to engage in that. It's such a huge, and the consequences will ripple for many years, that if anything, I've kind of avoided the news feeds and even things like Instagram, because I had the time to really fall into that. It's not a wonderland, but that Alice in Wonderland. I could have gone down that rabbit hole into what was happening in the Middle East. I guess I've given myself something quite saccharine that was kind of no real consequence. I think as people prepare for these, if there are listeners who are going to go into something like this, it's like, okay, well, what are you going to use your time for? Because you're going to be incapacitated to a degree for 3 months. I bought 2 or 3 books, and I've just left everywhere where I normally sit and scroll. I've just put books in those places. So there's a book about being lost, and it's called, it's either called Wayfinding or Pathfinding. We can put it in the show notes or whatever. It's a really nice book about how people have navigated historically as humans, as Homo sapiens, and how we get lost, both philosophically and literally, and how we find our way back, again, both philosophically and literally. It's a really fascinating book. So that's been quite consuming of the grey matter. And then another on a midlifer discovering surfing or rediscovering surfing. So I've put these analog distractions in place. It's been a journey, Karl, but I do think it's useful as people prepare for change to sort of go, okay, well, what are the things that I'm going to have to forego temporarily, and what am I going to fill my time with? I wouldn't put Vinted at the top of your list, but there are lesser evils, and there are probably things which are sort of also similarly more insidious. But yeah, it's been fascinating. My wife is back, and I'm delighted about that, because I'm sure that there will be high quality conversations and life together that will be a pleasant distraction from, chasing after another T-shirt for £7. It's more than a distraction, but it would be nice to be distracted by positive conversations with the person that I love most.
you've done an incredible job at highlighting the importance of being kind to ourselves when identifying coping strategies. We're not going to be perfect. Saccharine, sugary, quick hit wonders are great. And I think the reality is when so much of life is stripped away from what we would normally do in a way that we would normally interact with it, that would give us something back, then we have to appreciate that I just need to be in this space. Your ability to move in life has been shrunk considerably for the moment. That will change. Of that I'm confident. And so we turn to quick fixes. We turn to things that make us feel better, because in the absence of feeling good, we need something to replace that. It's good to hear that you're getting back and doing things a little bit more. I know you were out on one of the boards the other day, 2 days ago. So that's great to see. It's been shitty weather, with the odd punctuation here and there of a nice day. We've got some nicer days coming up. Your confidence in your ability, I'm confident, will continue to improve. It's good to hear that you recorded some videos and some content as well recently. So again, there's an expression that you're able to express a lot more that had not been there, understandably, for quite some time now. I think in anyone preparing for anything that's challenging coming up, be kind to yourself. Acknowledge that you're probably not going to be able to show up in the way that you want to, physically, mentally, emotionally. And how often do we, just for someone else's sake, go, yeah, I'm fine? How often, I mean, I hear this all the time in my patients, that they don't tell others that what they're going through and how much they are suffering. I think it's normal. I think we don't want to expose ourselves too much. And when we are honest with someone and we say, actually, I'm in quite a lot of pain, that people don't like to hear that there's suffering going on, do they?
No, not at all. It's absolutely true that I'm at 50% of my capacity and capability at a time when I think my business and my colleagues would wish me to be at 150%. In different times, we are maybe able to make that bridge, but physically and mentally right now I haven't been able to do so. And I've had to be kind to myself to go, I cannot be anything but this. This is actually less consequential, arguably, than the resectioning of the colon 2 years ago. That was 4 months off. However, this one is very focused and comes with quite a lot of specific routines that need to be maintained in order to flow through a day. I've never done so much washing. Personal hygiene is much more complicated with an open wound in that area. And so there's just practicalities of, I don't want to go to work, have a sort of an outage, and then find myself in London. These are really important considerations. I've gone through a process, and to your earlier point, it really attacks your identity. So I have a new empathy for people who do experience incontinence. I'm not incontinent, but I've been adjacent to it momentarily. And that attacks core identity. And withdrawing from, therefore, social situations and including work situations, I think is a potential consequence of that. That's not going to be my lived experience, but it has been momentarily. So, yeah, it throws up a lot. Kindness is the thing to inject into all of this. To self, to these temporary transitions that we may be forced or elect to go through. Overall, it's a learning experience. I think I've got a open or a flexible mindset, and so I'm always looking for what's the gold in this? What am I learning in it? Last weekend, I went off to Hove Park. It's near where you and I live, and there's a skate park that's mostly populated by one of two groups, either sub 10-year-old, low centre of gravity, fast-moving objects on varieties of skateboards, scooters or bikes, and their old dads who may or may not also have a skateboard, which made me smile. There's a circular area that's particularly for rollerblading, sort of absolutely perfectly flat, and I'm there with a surf skate, which is not really a skateboard. It looks like one, but it acts much more like a surfboard. And I'm going round and round and round, because once you push once and off you go, you can do this perpetually for as long as you might want to do it. And then realised I probably would have a highly developed left leg. So I thought I'd turn round and go in the opposite direction. And this minion came over, must have been 5, maybe 6. And bless their hearts went, "Hey, you're going the wrong way."
Yeah.
And in reflection, I'm like, "You're right, but you're also wrong." I think I'm going the right way.
You are indeed going the right way. Can I just give a nod as well for you going, I'm at 50% right
For
now.
sure.
Whatever percentage you're at, I don't think we do this enough, but putting your hand up and going, you know what, whatever capacity life is asking me to show up at, we can't always show up at that. If work is demanding 150 and you're only at 50 at the moment, I think we need to own that. It's tough and really, really difficult, but in being kind to ourselves and showing self-compassion and going, this is just where I'm at. I can't have any more than this right now.
It's so true. My boss and my colleagues have asked kind questions. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Surprised to see you back online. But the underlying culture is we need to be at 150%. And it's difficult sometimes to go into that, whether it's our culture at Deep Green or in any corporate culture, and say, I cannot perform at that level. Because it brings an inherent risk of being overlooked or sidelined or even superseded, or a natural redundancy. It's just not a sustainable culture. And so I think, as you and I talk about across many aspects of life, sometimes stoicism does not serve us individually nor collectively. And if it were safer and more comfortable to be able to say, I'm at 50%, I might be at 50% here for a while, and that means that I can go through periods of attention, but I'm just not going to have the same output. And as a team, to be prepared for that, I'd be a huge advocate for that. Against the backdrop of possibly some of the most challenging economic situations that we've experienced, say, since 2008, the first wave is past, but this is a set of waves. And so it's a challenging time, but us all being collectively conscious of where we are by percent and being prepared to carry and look out for and support, I think can only help.
We've got some other podcasts to be recording, haven't we, on quite a lot of the subjects we've covered. I'm mindful of our time.
Of course, and other people's.
And other people's as well.
Your mum and our listeners, our other listener.
Yeah, all one of them, yeah. You are going to get beyond where you are right now. I just want to say that.
Without doubt.
Yeah. And your right leg's going to get stronger, and you are absolutely going the right way at the moment.
Bless her heart. It's like that. When you have clarity, are the source of great joy. There's been some real moments. The gift of a friend making a flippant remark where there is gold. The wisdom of a child. I didn't challenge her, by the way, I just turned round.
Don't challenge a 5-year-old.
I looked to see if there were any signs to say one way, and there wasn't, but I wasn't going to challenge her. It was a fair comment. I smiled and turned. Sometimes that's what we need to do.
That's all we need to do, yeah.
Thanks, Karl.
Pleasure. Till next time.
See you there.